Welcome back. Now, the Business 20 Summit wraps up today ahead of the G20 Leaders Summit this weekend. The Business 20 provides companies across the globe with a platform to air their perspectives and solutions for some of our most pressing global economic challenges. Established in 2010, the B20 is considered to be one of the most influential G20 Engagement Groups. And with South Africa holding the G20 Presidency this year, I caught up with the CEO of Business Leadership South Africa, Busi Mavuso. BLSA represents over 70 of the country's largest businesses and multinational companies, and I asked her for her biggest takeaway from the B20.
Some of my key measure takeaways are some of the recommendations that came up from the work that has been done by the B20 teams. You remember we had 8 task forces that were looking at a whole range of issues, from energy to digital inclusion to employment and education to industrial transformation to finance and infrastructure to trade and investment. And the 3 key recommendations that I'm particularly excited about is one around how the G20 is going to assist Africa to implement the African Continental Free Trade Area. If that can be implemented, Ray, it actually gives us a good opportunity and huge impetus as the African continent. It unlocks the $3.4 trillion market, of the African continent. It allows the free movement of goods and people around the African continent. It allows us to strengthen our supply chains as the continent, and it definitely will increase the intra-African trade, which is only currently sitting at 16%. When you look at the intra-Europe trade, it's about 70%. So we need to be doing better in terms of trading with each other as the 54 African countries. The second one is around the finance and infrastructure and how the multilateral institutions are going to support us to champion the issue of reducing the cost of capital and the unfair bias that has actually been imposed, on Global South and on Africa in as far as the credit rating agencies are concerned. And there is one around ensuring digital inclusion. We still sit with many people in this country, many people in this continent who are not connected in any way. If you are not connected, you are actually being left out from participating in the economy. So I worry that if we don't address the issue of digital inclusion, you continue to widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots and between the poor and the rich. And we know that South Africa is currently the most unequal country in the world.
It is.
So the one of digital inclusion is actually quite exciting, for us to adopt and take forward.
We have to do this. We have to take steps forward. If I'm looking at a small business, what's in it for small business? There's costs to capital. It's great if you've got a big company, not so great if you're an SME.
Absolutely, but when you also look at it, so the conversations didn't really quite look at what we do for South African SMMEs per se. Remember, this is a global conversation. The issues that we raise have to resonate with all the 20 countries that are member of the G20. So we decided as the business community that instead of having a work stream that is just going to look at SMMEs, let's include the issue of SMMEs in the main work streams. As we talk about trade and investment, let's talk about what does SMMEs being supported look like, in the trade and investment. When we talk about the issue of finance and infrastructure and the cost of capital, how do we ensure that we include the SMME agenda? When we talk about the issue of employment and education, of digital inclusion, of industrial transformation, all of those, when you look at the recommendations, you will see that they actually cater for the advancement of SMMEs, for the advancement of the gender agenda, women-led businesses, for the advancement of youth-owned businesses. So I think we've been very strategic to bring the topic of SMMEs in the mainstream instead of it sitting there on the corner, SMMEs alone, discussing their own issues and being left out from the main critical conversations, as it were.
It's so important. I want to go back to Africa, though.
Yes.
We need to start with beneficiation. We need to start taking our minerals, taking our products, getting them onto the global stage. How do we do this at the G20?
When you think about the impact of the African Continental Free Trade Area, once that has been established, it reduces the burden on us as Africa to try and find markets outside of the African continent. If you look at the $3.4 trillion that are traded in Africa, There is a lot to go around for all of us as 54 countries, but precisely because we don't have the same rules, the same standards, because we are all doing our own thing, because there is this silo mentality around the 54 countries, it makes it difficult for us to actually trade with each other. So as soon as you unlock and you implement and you accelerate, the African Continental Free Trade Area, it benefits us. But I really think that there is also that importance, as you're saying, of ensuring that we can actually beneficiate in the country. We own 90% of the world's minerals. There is no reason why those should be extracted raw, sent out to Asia, and we buy them back, at a price that is 10 times, as watches and whatever the case is. So all of those conversations and all of those issues, when you look at how Africa needs to be supported, when you look at the issue of the African Continental Free Trade Area, definitely those issues will be addressed, Ray.
Will the G20 take the B20 seriously? I mean, I love these initiatives and I love the things that we've decided on, right? But will they take will G20 take the B20 seriously, or will we just see world leaders arrive and leave?
Ray, business is the only social partner the world over that has got the ability to make the economy go around. The role of governments all over the world is to make sure that they put policies in place that will enable the investment from business. So they have no choice but to actually take on board the recommendations that we've put in place. If we want to ensure that our countries work, if we want to ensure that the investment continues to trickle, if we want to ensure that our economies continue to grow, if we want to make sure that we continue, addressing the infrastructure issues, the poverty issues, the inclusion issues in all our economies, you have to listen to what business says, because business is the one that is actually sitting with the money. We had a conversation, I think it must have been a month ago in this country, where we were talking about how the balance sheets of South African businesses are so cash, there's a lot of cash actually sitting there that is actually not being used. So when you're not giving businesses the right opportunities, the right policies, the right reforms in place, the right environment, they sit with their cash. Remember, capital has got many addresses. And if you make it difficult for capital to actually land in your country, it goes somewhere else. Capital is like water. It will always follow the path of least resistance. And I think a lot of countries are actually realizing that. So the recommendations that are actually going to ensure that we prosperize the global economy that come from the B20 have to be taken seriously by the G20. They might not adopt all 30 of them because that is a lot. But at least if you maybe look at what does the 80-20 for the global economy look like? What are the top 5 that if you were to implement will make sure that the global economy prospers? That would be a good outcome.
But perhaps a final question, it's all in the side deals. I mean, everybody gets to meet everybody else.
Yes.
Sure, you got America and they got their tariffs and their anti-South Africa thing going on.
Yes.
But there are the side deals.
Yes.
And that's what it's also about.
That is what it's about. And when you look at what the side deals are informed by, countries from all over the world are obviously looking for markets. Africa is quite attractive because we are the only country in the world that is growing at such a fast pace from a population perspective than all the other countries. Europe is declining, Asia is growing, but not at our pace. In 2050, Africa will have 2.7 billion people, 25% of the world's population. So the market is going to be in Africa. So Asia, Australia, Europe, America are actually looking at Africa as the market of the future. That is why there is so much interest in the African continent. And South Africa becomes then strategic to the African continent because remember, we are the strongest economy. We are the most advanced from a technology perspective. We are the most resilient. We are the most diversified. You get better integration into the global economy if you are sitting in South Africa. You've got deep and liquid capital markets, in South Africa. So you actually have a lot going, for South Africa. We are actually key and quite central to the African continent. So I really think that all these international business leaders that have actually come to the African continent are actually seeking those opportunities. They want to see where they should actually be investing and where they should actually be putting their money. What industries are growing, what opportunities actually lie here in South Africa. And those are the side conversations that we're actually, so the fact that there is so much interest in the South African B20 and G20 and in the broader African continent is definitely a win for us.
And that was BLSA CEO Busi Mavuso.